That morning began like any other in the quiet town of Milford, Pennsylvania. The air outside carried the faint smell of rain, and the coffee machine hummed softly on the counter. Barbara Owens, most people called her Barb, stood by the window, watching a pair of sparrows peck at crumbs on the porch. After 43 years of marriage, mornings had a rhythm, a kind of gentle predictability. Her husband Richard had been in the hospital for 3 days after what doctors called a mild stroke. Barb planned to visit him later that morning. She'd already packed a bag with his robe, reading glasses, and the crossword puzzle book he loved. But then she heard the front door open. It was her son, Daniel. His footsteps were heavy, the kind that carried bad news. He paused in the doorway, eyes red but dry. "Mom," he said softly, "Dad passed away early this morning." Barb froze. For a second, her body refused to understand what the words meant. She felt her knees weaken and reached for the counter. The sound of the refrigerator filled the silence. "Are you sure?" she whispered. Daniel nodded, staring at the floor. "The hospital called me first. It was around 4 a.m. Before Barb could say anything more, Lauren, her daughter-in-law, stepped in behind him. Her voice was smooth, controlled, almost rehearsed. "Don't worry, Barb," she said, setting her handbag on the table. "We'll handle the paperwork, the funeral arrangements, everything. You should rest." Barb nodded numbly, though something about Lauren's tone didn't sit right. It was polite but distant. She noticed Daniel avoiding her gaze, fiddling with his watch. After they left, the house fell into an eerie silence. Barb sat at the kitchen table, staring at the untouched cup of coffee. The spoon trembled slightly in her hand. Richard had promised he'd come home. He'd said he was feeling stronger. Outside, the clouds began to gather. Somewhere deep inside, Barb felt a flicker of unease, something that told her this story wasn't finished. The next morning, Barb woke up with a pounding headache. The house felt too still, too quiet. She poured herself another cup of coffee and tried to shake off the heaviness that had settled in her chest. Richard was gone. That truth alone should have been enough to explain the silence. But something else was off, something she couldn't name. At exactly 9:12 a.m., the phone rang. The caller ID showed the local bank where she and Richard kept their joint savings. Barb hesitated for a moment before picking up. "Miss Owens," a polite female voice said, "this is Sheila from Milford First Bank. I'm calling to confirm a large withdrawal made from your account yesterday afternoon." Barb frowned. "I'm sorry, there must be a mistake. My husband was hospitalized." There was a pause on the other end, the sound of fingers tapping on a keyboard. "According to our system, the withdrawal was made in person, $243,000. Signed by Richard Owens." Barb felt the blood drain from her face. "That's impossible," she whispered. "Would you like to come in and review the surveillance footage? We can verify the identity of the person who made the withdrawal." An hour later, Barb sat in a small office with the blinds half closed. The manager placed a laptop in front of her, pressed play, and stepped aside. The footage showed a man entering the bank lobby wearing a dark jacket and a baseball cap. He moved quickly, head down, signed a few papers, then looked up toward the camera for a split second. Barb's heart stopped. It wasn't Richard. It was Daniel. She sat motionless, her hands gripping the edge of the desk. The manager said something about contacting the authorities, but Barb barely heard him. Her mind replayed Daniel's words from the day before. "Dad passed away early this morning." Now she knew. That sentence was more than a lie. It was the start of something far darker. Barb didn't drive straight home from the bank. Instead, she pulled into the parking lot of a small diner just outside town. Her hands were still shaking as she ordered a cup of coffee she didn't intend to drink. The steam rose from the cup, blurring her reflection in the window. She needed to think. Daniel had emptied the account. He'd looked her in the eye and lied about his father's death. But why? And if Richard wasn't the one who signed those papers, then where did that signature come from? After a long pause, Barb took out her phone and called her daughter, Rachel. "Mom, what's wrong?" Rachel asked, her voice tight with worry. "Something's happened," Barb said quietly. "It's about your brother and your father's money." 2 hours later, Rachel arrived from Pittsburgh, her briefcase still in hand. She was 38, sharp-minded, and nothing like her brother. When Barb showed her the footage from the bank, Rachel's jaw clenched. "Don't confront him yet," she said after a long silence. "If Daniel did this, he's desperate. We need to find out how deep this goes before we act." They spoke in hushed tones, heads close together, like co-conspirators. The waitress refilled their coffee cups and glanced at them with quiet curiosity. Rachel suggested they start by checking Richard's home office, the one room Daniel had avoided mentioning since the funeral. If her instincts were right, that's where the truth began and where it might end. When they got back home, Daniel was already waiting in the living room, pretending to look at his phone. "Hey, Mom," he said casually. "Did you find Dad's paperwork?" Barb forced a smile. "Not yet, honey. I'll look tomorrow." Her voice was calm, but inside, something had already shifted. The mother he knew was gone. The next morning, Daniel left early, claiming he had to meet with the funeral director. Lauren followed soon after, dressed neatly, perfume lingering in the hallway. When the front door finally clicked shut, Barb and Rachel exchanged a look. "Now," Rachel said. They moved down the hall toward Richard's office, a room that had been locked since his hospitalization. The door was heavy oak, the kind her husband used to boast about building himself. Barb reached under the edge of a hallway runner and pulled out a small brass key. Richard had always kept a spare hidden there, just in case. The lock turned with a soft click. Dust motes swirled in the sunlight spilling through the blinds. The room smelled faintly of paper and cologne. Everything looked untouched except for the desk drawer. Its lock had been forced. Rachel crouched down and began sorting through files. "Mom," she said after a moment, "you might want to see this." On the desk lay a manila envelope marked property records inside. They found a deed to a secluded cabin in the Pocono Mountains, purchased 6 months earlier. Barb frowned. He never mentioned a cabin. Next came a credit card statement addressed to Richard. Dozens of transactions, luxury hotels, jewelry stores, dinners for two. Barb's breath caught. He wasn't alone. Rachel stayed quiet, then pulled out another document, a life insurance policy. She read the first page, her voice low. $2 million. Beneficiary Daniel Owens. Barb's hand trembled as she took the papers. "He changed it," she murmured. "He changed everything." They sat in silence for a long moment, the weight of betrayal settling heavy in the air. Then Barb's phone rang, cutting through the stillness. The caller ID showed Milford Police Department. "This is Detective Hannah Reeves," a calm voice said. "Mrs. Owens, we received a report of suspicious financial activity connected to your family's account. I'd like to meet with you to discuss it." Barb glanced at Rachel, who mouthed, "Don't say too much." "Of course," Barb replied. "I'll come by this afternoon." When the call ended, Rachel closed the folder slowly. "Mom," she whispered, "whatever's happening, it's bigger than we thought." That night, Barb couldn't sleep. Every sound in the house made her heart jump. The refrigerator's hum, the creak of the floorboards, everything felt louder, sharper. Rachel had gone to bed in the guest room, but Barb stayed awake, sitting by the kitchen window, the phone beside her. Around 2 a.m. she heard it, the unmistakable sound of breaking glass. Her pulse quickened. She crept down the hallway, her bare feet silent on the wood floor. A beam of light flickered from Richard's office. Someone was inside. Barb backed away and hurried to wake Rachel. "Stay quiet," she whispered. "There's someone here." They crouched on the staircase landing, listening. 2 men were speaking in low, urgent tones. "Check the desk again," one said. "He said the papers are hidden here somewhere." The other cursed under his breath. "You sure the old man wasn't lying?" Barb froze. Old man, her mind raced. Were they talking about Richard? He was supposed to be dead. Before she could make sense of it, headlights swept across the windows. Police. The intruders bolted through the back door, just as officers rushed in. Detective Hannah Reeves, the same woman from the phone call, was among them. "Mrs. Owens, are you all right?" Reeves asked, scanning the room. Barb nodded shakily. "They were looking for something. They said my husband told them it was here." Reeves exchanged a glance with another officer. "Your husband? I thought you said he passed away." Barb hesitated, the words catching in her throat. "So did I." The detective walked over to the desk. "We found a listening device here," she said, holding up a small black recorder. "Whoever planted it has been monitoring this room." Rachel's face went pale. "Mom, this isn't just about money." Reeves looked between them, her expression grave. "Mrs. Owens, your son Daniel is under investigation for financial fraud. If he's involved with these men, you and your daughter could be in danger. You should stay somewhere safe tonight." Barb stared at the shattered window, her reflection fractured in the glass. Somewhere deep down she already knew this wasn't over. It was only beginning. The next morning, Barb sat in the living room, staring at the broken window now covered with plywood. The house smelled faintly of smoke from the night before. Rachel was on the phone with the insurance company when Barb's cell buzzed on the table. The number was blocked. She hesitated before answering. "Hello?" A voice came through, weak, rough, and familiar. "Barb, it's me." She went cold. "Who is this?" "It's Richard," the voice said. "I'm alive." For a moment the room spun. Barb gripped the arm of the chair, heart pounding. "That's not possible." "I saw the paperwork," Daniel said. "I know what he said," Richard interrupted. "He tried to kill me." Barb's breath caught. "What are you talking about?" "I didn't have a stroke," he said. "He switched my medication. The doctor caught it too late. I woke up in a private clinic, off the books. A nurse, her name's Diana, helped me get out before Daniel found out." Barb covered her mouth. "Where are you?" "I'm at the cabin, the one in the Poconos. There's a safe under the floorboards. Code is our anniversary. Everything's in there, the bank records, the toxicology report, and a recording. Bring the police, but hurry, Daniel's looking for me." The call crackled and went dead. Barb tried to redial, but the line was gone. Rachel came running in. "Who was that?" Barb looked up, her eyes wide with a mix of fear and determination. "Your father. He's alive." Within the hour, Detective Reeves was at the house, taking notes as Barb recounted every word. "If this is true," Reeves said, "we need to move fast." That night they drove toward the mountains under a low, heavy sky. Wind whipped through the trees as headlights carved through the darkness. And then, as they rounded the last bend, Barb saw it, orange light flickering against the pines. The cabin was on fire. Flames clawed at the night sky as Barb's car screeched to a stop. She jumped out before the engine even died, the heat hitting her face like a wave. The cabin, Richard's hidden refuge, was engulfed in fire. "Mom, stay back," Rachel shouted, pulling her away from the smoke. Through the chaos, Barb saw movement near the tree line, a shadow, tall and familiar. Daniel. He stood frozen, a red gas can dangling from his hand, the fire reflecting in his eyes. "Daniel." Barb's voice cut through the wind. "What have you done?" He turned toward her, his face pale and streaked with sweat. "You weren't supposed to be here, Mom." Detective Reeves and her team had followed close behind. She shouted, "Put the gun down, Daniel. Now." For a moment it seemed like he might run. But then he dropped it, hands trembling. "You don't understand," he said, voice breaking. "He was going to ruin everything. He was leaving us, leaving you." Barb took a step closer, ignoring the officers around her. "You tried to kill your father," she said, voice low and steady. "You almost killed me?" Daniel's face twisted with something between guilt and desperation. "I did it for us," he said. "He was giving everything to that nurse. You think he cared about you? He lied to you, Mom, he always lied." Barb shook her head slowly. "Maybe he did, but not like this, not murder." Detective Reeves moved in, her voice firm. "Daniel Owens, you are under arrest for attempted murder, arson, and fraud. You have the right to remain silent." Daniel didn't resist. He just stood there, shoulders slumped, as the officers cuffed his hands behind his back. As they led him past her, Barb met his eyes one last time. For a brief second, she saw the boy he once was, the little boy who used to bring her wildflowers from the backyard. Then he was gone, swallowed by the flashing red and blue lights. The fire crackled louder, collapsing what remained of the cabin. Barb turned toward the flames, tears streaming down her cheeks, and whispered, "It's over, Richard. It's finally over." The days that followed blurred together police reports, court hearings, and endless questions. The evidence from the cabin's remains, including a partially melted safe, confirmed everything Richard had told her. Inside, investigators found fragments of financial statements, a voice recorder, and traces of the sedative Daniel had used. Richard survived, but barely. He was recovering in a private hospital under police protection. When Barb finally saw him, he looked older, smaller somehow, like a man carrying the weight of all his mistakes. "I didn't mean for any of this to happen," he said, voice raspy. "I just wanted out." Barb studied him for a long moment before replying, "You always wanted out, Richard. You just didn't expect the fire to follow you." They signed the divorce papers quietly a few weeks later. No shouting, no tears, just two people acknowledging an ending that had been years in the making. Daniel's trial moved quickly. With the recordings and forensic reports, there was little room for denial. He was sentenced to 18 years in prison for attempted murder, fraud, and arson. When the verdict was read, Barb sat in the back of the courtroom, hands folded in her lap. She didn't cry. She didn't feel triumph either, just a deep, steady calm, like a storm that had finally passed. Afterward, she spoke briefly with her daughter-in-law, Lauren. "You don't owe me anything," Barb said gently, "but I'll help with the kids. They shouldn't carry his sins." Lauren nodded, tears in her eyes. "You're a better woman than I'll ever be." Barb smiled faintly. "No, just one who's finally learned when to stop forgiving." Before leaving the courthouse, she paused in the hallway, feeling the cool marble beneath her fingertips. For the first time in months, she could breathe. The truth had burned everything down, but from the ashes, she was still standing. 6 months later, spring arrived early in Milford. The air smelled of rain and lilac, and the first warm breeze drifted through the open kitchen window. Barb stood at the counter, packing a small leather suitcase. The same kitchen where everything had fallen apart now felt lighter, quieter, like a new house built on old foundations. Rachel helped her fold the last sweater. "You're really doing it," she said, smiling. Barb nodded. "Ireland's been on my list for 40 years. I figure it's about time I stop waiting." Outside, the taxi honked. Barb took one last look around the room, the coffee mug by the sink, the faded curtains, the photo of her children from years ago. For a moment, sadness brushed against her heart, but it didn't linger. "I thought starting over meant forgetting," she said softly. "Turns out it just means remembering without pain." Rachel hugged her tightly. "You earned this, Mom." At the airport, Barb watched the planes rise one by one into the clouds. When her turn came, she felt no fear, only a quiet thrill. As the wheels left the ground, she whispered to herself, "For the first time in 43 years, I'm living for me." Below, the world spread wide and green. Sometimes survival isn't about revenge. It's about rebirth, finding the courage to keep living after everything burns down. And for Barbara Owens, the woman who had lost everything, this was not an ending. It was the beginning she should have had all along.